of dreams recall tomorrow, where every frown is his voice.
Welcome back to The Place of Places, an in-depth analysis of William Saroyan's 1972 memoir, Places Where I've Done Time. Today, we examine Chapter 14, The Public Library, Fresno, 1921. We're still in Saroyan's youth, before he gained fame, as we have been for the last 8 chapters. Soon we will jump ahead in time, but as Saroyan says in Chapter 13, the early years were so packed with everything that one year seemed like a very long time, as of course it was. It is only when the years begin to repeat themselves that they seem to be gone almost instantly. Unlike many of us, Saroyan's childhood memories are some of his clearest. In particular, the public library was one of the most influential places in his life, whether in Fresno, San Francisco, or anywhere else he lived. Like the previous chapter, the actual place in the title is more of an inspirational jumping-off point. If the Palace Theater represented comedy and tragedy in his life, then the public library represented opportunity and expansion. He tells us that Fresno was no place to linger as a new man, but since he was still only a child, he couldn't really go anywhere physically, so he escaped in spirit, by book, at the public library. But he had many responsibilities, as did all in the Saroyan family. The 4 children and Takui found work wherever they could, sometimes by offering a low-cost, sensible service to others. And when they weren't performing services, they were managing a home, including chickens and walnut collection from a tree in their backyard. Saroyan's ceaseless energy allowed him to make the most of these packed days, figuring out how to most efficiently get all of his work done so that he could eat, sleep, and play in the empty lot next to the house at 2226 San Benito, a gathering place for the boys of Armenian Town. Armenian Town flourished between the First and Second World Wars. The area was also occupied by German, Russians, Japanese, and Chinese, though there was also a distinct Chinatown nearby. The area from Los Angeles Street to Kern Street, between the Southern Pacific and Santa Fe Railroad tracks, was called Armenian Town. It was then, and remains, an enclave for poor immigrant populations. As the various immigrant populations gained wealth over the years, they spread out across the city. Today, highways 99 and 41 run through the old neighborhood, and it is mostly industrial, though it may be redeveloped. In Saroyan's day, it was a hub of activity where he and his Armenian friends needn't fear the discrimination and exclusion they faced at school or in other parts of town. San Benito was actually part of the expansion movement out of the lettered streets of Armenian Town. Still, even as the Armenian population grew and expanded, restrictive covenant laws prohibited them from buying houses in more valuable parts of the city. During this time in Saroyan's life, the 1920s, discrimination against Armenians was reaching its fever pitch. In addition to real estate redlining, they were excluded from joining athletics and social clubs. These restrictions were not lost on William, who may have also felt the library provided mental escape from this frustrating reality, and perhaps instructions to facilitate his physical escape. At the library, he voraciously, perhaps manically, filled his head with books, newspapers, magazines, reading for hours until the place itself, its narrow aisles and mustiness, drove him back outside, where he was able to move again. In fact, knowing how much Saroyan loved to be on the move is something of a marvel and testament to his focus, that he was able to stay in the library. The books sustained him intellectually as he outgrew the small-town energy of Fresno. Although being in his community and with his family nourished him, it also strengthened him enough to want to leave them and explore on his own. The library features prominently in all forms of his writing. In his early storytelling, it represents truth and the world. In Cat Spells Everything, written in 1957 and read for a talk at the University of Southern California, he informs us that the library is larger than the world. While it is possible for anybody who wishes to do so to stay in the light of the sun as he travels around the world before a full day has gone by, a visitor to the library could not, even in 100 years, pass through more than a small portion of the books. It was at the library that he discovered Dickens and Guy de Maupassant, who ignited his love for the written word and kept him going back to the library for more. In that same USC reading, he tells us that the written word has the ability to influence human nature just as the sun does. That was what it meant to him, and the library was the main cathedral of words. At some points in his childhood, his mother and other relatives warned him against going to the library, where he might be exposed to too much evil for a child. And he tells us that he was exposed to disturbing content, but it made him question human nature even more deeply, and he found this motivational. In New York, he spent his days at the famous public library on Fifth Avenue, mostly to learn how to write through extensive reading. When Saroyan was born, the Fresno Public Library wasn't very old. The Fresno City Library was built in 1904 as a Carnegie Library. In the early 1900s, steel baron and philanthropist Andrew Carnegie funded the construction of 3,000 public libraries around America and Canada. Prior to this, many libraries were privately managed and required subscriptions to use. The library was the great equalizer, a place any person could go of any age and read without being bothered or asked to pay. And this appealed to Saroyan as well. He found that having a job and reading at the library were better than a college education, and in some ways this mindset may have affected his reception over the years. Saroyan came of age during the Depression, when it was in vogue to read about the common man. Communism wasn't yet a threat, but a promise. Woody Guthrie sang "This Land is Your Land." But this style went out of favor after World War II, when huge numbers of Americans attended college on the GI Bill, and rapid wealth created a thriving middle class that celebrated consumerism, an ideology that was basically the opposite of everything Saroyan gleaned from the public library. This is an important place in understanding Saroyan's belief systems and how his personality was shaped and influenced by the good old American spirit of expansion and movement, be they cerebral or physical. Let's put this on the Saroyan map and move on.